Hey, this is Tony with MusicGuyOnline.com. I got your 3-minute mix fix video tutorial of the week, and today I'm going to teach you how to calm and tame an overly harsh rhythm guitar part using an EQ. And you can apply this to lead guitar or really any instrument which is a little bit too harsh in the 1 and above K range in the frequency spectrum. But rhythm guitars especially, I tend to find this is a problem a lot with clients I'm working with. You know, things which sounded good in the studio at the time, you know, like bright, immediate sounding guitars, can sound great when you're recording them. They can sound great coming out of the speaker, but then, you know, later, weeks later, months later, after it's all been packed up and we're in the mixing stage, and maybe you have a few of these rhythm guitars all kind of driving together, that's when you start to be like, oh, this is kind of grating on the ear. And, you know, you can't do much at that point in terms of recording, but we don't have to throw out the recordings that we have. We can just tame them a bit with an EQ. And I have an example here of something which is not the worst offender I've ever heard, but let's just play a little bit of it. Very rockin' part, just some open chords, I think maybe with a capo, but I'm going to drop an EQ on it. You can do a 3-band EQ. I prefer the visual 8-band EQ here in live, just to give me extra control over what I'm working with. Now, first off, I'm going to do something which is unrelated to any of this. I'm going to cut off the low end because we don't need the low end here. We don't need the low end in a lot of tracks. That aren't, you know, the bass and like kick drum, things like that. We want to save these frequencies for those kind of instruments which are meant for it. So I'm just going to roll off here. You can see I had this set with a relatively smooth cue coming down this shelf right here, and then this pass, and then see, it's at about 100 hertz, and I'm going to roll that off. You're not going to hear much of a difference at all here. Just kind of rumbling noise that we don't need. All right, so I'm going to let this keep playing. I'm going to see me start to make some cuts around the 1K range, some nice wide cuts. Wider is always better, a wider cue. Keep that in mind, sounds more authentic, more natural. But let's just get to work. So it sounds a little less sharp, but it still sounds great, you know. I mean, we're coming up with a very different tone just by making, what is this, about a 2 dB cut here around 1K, and then higher up, maybe 1.5 to 2 dB cut up here closer to 5K. But, I mean, that's pretty much all I'm doing. It still sounds great. We still have these mids that, you know, where a lot of the identity lives, but just making that cut there lets more of those mids come through. It shapes the sound, and we're just getting rid of that harsh abrasiveness while still, you know, honoring the brightness of that guitar part. And remember, on its own, it doesn't sound bad. It's just when we start bringing in a lot of these guitar parts, some of these are going to sound obviously brighter than others. That's when the sum of these parts can just kind of add up to be very abrasive, especially when you're adding so many of these different tracks which have, you know, high-end kind of noise just featured in there, which we just don't need. You know, we want to save that room, you know, just like we did for the bass. We want to save some of this room for the cymbals and things which are meant to be a little bit brighter, and we can still get a great tone out of our existing once a bit too harsh guitar part, just with a simple little EQ cut right here in the 1 to 2K range by a couple dB. So experiment, decide what works best for your music, and yeah, that's pretty much it. You can do the same thing on the rhythm guitar level. Again, since it's more of a global thing, you might want to go a little bit, just, you know, a little more conservative, basically, when it comes to that, but because that's going to affect all your guitars. But there you go. We now have a less harsh, less bright, but still maintaining the essence of that guitar bit right there with a little bit of EQ cutting. All right? So please subscribe if you haven't. I'm Tony with Music Guy Online, and I hope to see you next week.